Been a pretty wild last few days with lots of things happening in this games industry. Primarily though, it really is just gearing up for everything that is coming this November. Various gaming journalists and influencers have begun sharing impressions and video of both the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, and from what I've seen, it's been almost all positive opinions, with many blown away with the jump that we are taking next gen. The power of these consoles has been made clear with faster load times and phenomenal graphical prowess. Obviously, PC players will probably shrug their shoulders, but it really is just good from a development standpoint because leaving behind the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 hardware will hopefully unlock new levels of innovation in the various genres of gaming that we all know and love. Besides next-gen consoles, Amazon jumped into the headlines with the announcement of yet another streaming platform, Luna, because just why not? It is already looking better than Stadia, which, judging by recent actions made by Google, it really is unclear if they may or may not have already given up on the Stadia experiment. Just a strange decision all around to not put it on the new Chromecast day one, if it was something that they really believed in and wanted to build up. In other news, Ubisoft continues to be an utter disgrace in the year 2020, with the exposés not slowing down. BioWare's next game is none other than Mass Effect Legendary Edition, a remaster of the Mass Effect trilogy, coming early 2021. This has been leaked so many times already, but it was supposed to arrive this year, but was internally delayed by EA to early 2021 because they reportedly were not happy with the quality of Mass Effect 1's upgrades made to gameplay and graphics. EA being concerned about quality, not something you see or hear every day. Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War has been a hot topic issue, with the game's alpha featuring skill-based matchmaking, something that has not gone over well with many. Arguments have been made to keep it only in ranked playlists, but Activision has mostly been quiet in regards to this criticism, which is nothing new as this is a lingering years-old issue, with the only answer being reverse boosting, something that many pros have admitted to doing just to have fun and not being stuck in sweat lobbies. Call of Duty's poor optimization also continues to be a major problem, as Modern Warfare no longer fits onto a 250GB SSD, which is honestly just astonishing. Marvel's Avengers game announced that they fixed over 1,000 bugs, which I don't know if it should be treated as an achievement or an indication that the game needed more development time but was rushed out the door incomplete. Anyway, as I said at the start, a lot going on in this video game industry right now, but in today's video we have some huge main topics to go over, including the revelation that Electronic Arts were very close to being the owners of Bethesda, Insomniac feeling absolute rage from the internet with their interesting decision to recast Peter Parker's face and go with a design that looks like discount or deepfake Tom Holland. Epic Games is being investigated by the United States government. Blizzard 2.0 tells you all you need to know about how Activision has destroyed what is current day Blizzard, and probably the biggest topic for today overall is the misinformation and various hit pieces being thrown at Cyberpunk 2077 and CD Projekt Red right now. And yes, I am going to go off a little bit because some little weasels are misrepresenting my views on the situation. So yeah, this is going to be definitely a very fun video, and it's also more fun because it is brought to you by Displate. By far this has to be one of my favorite partnerships because this is a product that I personally do use. Displates are phenomenally well manufactured metal posters for all kinds of artwork, coming in different sizes, finishes, and frames, featuring over 800,000 designs from areas like video games, manga, movies, comics, nature, history, and much more. When purchasing Displates, you can expect fast delivery, prints on demand with each signed by the master of production, an easy to set up magnet mounting system which removes concerns over damaging your walls, and also each displate sold means a tree planted. As you can see on the screen, these are some of the high quality metal displates that I have picked out, and yes, Displate actually has partnered with companies like CD Projekt Red, which is why I had to get some of the beautiful Cyberpunk 2077 prints that they have available, like the Samurai Welcome to Night City print, which is a personal favorite of mine. If you're looking for more recommendations, I have my own collection list composed on my Displate profile, which includes some amazing Witcher, Cyberpunk, and sci-fi planet designs. If you are interested in getting a Displate, follow the link in the description down below. You'll be helping to support my channel with each purchase, and also right now you'll receive a 30% discount if you get one this week, or 20% after that by using my link. Anyway, again, a big thank you to Displate for sponsoring the video. Nonetheless, right now the biggest question in gaming is what will happen with Bethesda once they officially are under the Microsoft umbrella. If it's not clear already, this deal still has to make its way through the approval process, which does take time. Its expected closing will happen Q2 of next year, which is sooner than some had expected a massive deal like this would take. But I guess what's on everyone's mind is exclusivity, and whether or not Xbox will make upcoming games like The Elder Scrolls 6 and Starfield exclusive to Xbox platforms. Now, here's the deal. Last year, Aaron Greenberg, the general manager of marketing at Xbox, announced in an interview with Twinfinite that they were changing their put games on everything they can approach. He specifically stated at the time, "We more than doubled our studios over the past year, and as these new studios are transitioning, some of them had existing arrangements to publish games across multiple devices, like The Outer Worlds. But going forward, these new studios will focus on making games for our platforms, and we have no plans to further expand our exclusive first-party games to other consoles." So these remarks have been pointed out by many, indicating what could or will happen to future Bethesda games. More recently though, Sarah Bond, a corporate vice president at Xbox, revealed in a blog post that one of the things that has me most excited is seeing the roadmap with Bethesda's future games, coming to Xbox console and PC, including Starfield, the highly anticipated new space epic currently in development by Bethesda Game Studios. The clear and obvious omission many have noticed is the no mention to PlayStation at all. As I said in a previous video, I think it's very likely that unfortunately, almost everything Bethesda puts out will be at the very least timed exclusives to the Xbox platform. You don't spend $7.5 billion and keep things how they were. Xbox was criticized for their lack of exclusives, and they solved that problem very fast and big with this huge purchase. Former Bethesda Softworks founder Christopher Weaver, who left the company in 2007, also shared a similar opinion when he recently spoke to website Inverse, saying the acquisition of Bungie acted as an important trigger for the success of the early Xbox. Depending upon how soon Bethesda can prime the Microsoft pipeline, I suspect Microsoft is looking at their playbook and looking to repeat one of its best moves. If the strategy works, it will be a brilliant counter move against Sony. Users from around the world will be the ultimate beneficiaries of the deal. I wish them well. Weaver would further add, "I do not think it is any accident that this announcement occurred so close to Sony's PS5 announcement. There are only a limited number of proven creators of AAA. What Microsoft owns, Sony cannot get. There are many economies of scale that consolidation between the right partners has the capacity to provide, but the ultimate test will be evidenced by the quality of products produced over time." Bloomberg recently published a report about Robert Altman, chairman and CEO of ZeniMax, and revealed some very nerve-wracking details of what could have happened had Microsoft not been interested. At the beginning of this piece, just a funny quote that came from Altman was him saying sometime recently, "We're generally considered the company who creates the highest quality games. As a result, we have an enormous fan base around the world," which may have been true a decade ago, but times have changed. And let's not beat around the bush, Bethesda as a whole has been a mess from a creative and financial standpoint, although maybe this should be expected from a 70-year-old corrupt businessman who probably has never played one of these games in his life. Much of this piece does outline Altman's career, which is full of scandal, but what was most startling is the news that Electronic Arts, EA, was among the bidders of ZeniMax. Much like in Hollywood, franchises such as Fallout and Elder Scrolls remain valuable, as consumers continue to play them online and purchase updates and items within the games. As industry valuations rose, Altman considered selling ZeniMax for several years, and at one point was close to a deal with rival Electronic Arts. In the end, he found the perfect choice, a classy operator at a fancy price. And yes, what's interesting about the $7.5 billion price tag is the company was evaluated in 2016 for a third of that. So either Microsoft was willing to overspend, or those 2016 reports greatly undervalued the company's worth. Either way, I think we can all agree that it's for the best that Bethesda is not under Electronic Arts. I can only imagine Android Wilson telling one or more of the Bethesda teams that they cannot use their game engines anymore and have to use the EA stupid proprietary Frostbite engine, which has nearly destroyed BioWare and did destroy Visceral Games. But also, just infect your mind for a second of the possibility of Fallout or the Elder Scrolls Ultimate Team. Just imagine how yucky that would be. But also remember who EA actually is. This recent news story kinda sums it all up. EA criticized for promoting FIFA microtransactions in UK toy shops. Oh, don't worry though guys, it was a mistake, EA claims, although evidence points to this being a thing for at least the last couple of years. Funny how it's always a mistake only when they get exposed for disgusting shenanigans like this. They know exactly what they were doing because selling FIFA Ultimate Team loot boxes and getting the little ones involved in their glorified slot machines is the goal. Certainly Microsoft is not a perfect company, but the last few years with Phil Spencer steering the boat has been as good as it gets in terms of leadership and pro-consumer decision making, which is encouraging for the future of Bethesda, but just the idea of it being almost a possibility that slimy EA could have taken control is a bit concerning and scary. Anyway, Starfield may very well be the first game published under Microsoft, assuming everything goes as it's supposed to. As of late, there have been some interesting screenshots that supposedly leaked, coming from an early build of the game. It's hard to say if it's real or not, but it does look very Gamebryo engine-ish, if that makes any sense. Either way, definitely somewhat hopeful Bethesda as a whole turns things around under the Microsoft banner. But now let's dive into the Cyberpunk 2077 madness, because it sure as hell is not slowing down at all. I'm sure many of you have seen the headlines, the articles, the outrage, and even some of my tweets, which I personally feel have been misinterpreted for my actual opinion on the situation that is ongoing with CDPR and Cyberpunk 2077. But the outrage isn't just in regards to crunch, it's just various hit pieces on certain aspects of the game. I personally just find all of this ridiculous. I've been saying this for years, but CDPR's openness is, well, it's to blame for a lot of what's happening right now. There's a reason why I believe companies like Rockstar Games just stay silent throughout development until the finish line. I mean, we saw with Red Dead Redemption 2. It was really smooth sailing until the end, in which there was one article, I believe it came from Vulture, the New York Magazine, one of them, in which Dan Houser, the company's founder, he's no longer with them, but at the time he said that they were working 100-hour weeks. He meant the narrative department. He meant himself because he was passionate about it, but these quotes ended up being, well, they were weaponized into making it appear that all of Rockstar Games developers were doing that. And then many employees came out debunking this, but there was other reports, there was other problems at Rockstar Games indeed with crunch, but this specific piece was, it just wasn't true. But the misinformation just never seems to get corrected in this gaming industry. Now, Cyberpunk 2077, before we get to the crunch, these are just some of the hit pieces that I'm talking about that are happening right now. Forbes, Cyberpunk 2077 tries to change the subject with a new Keanu Reeves commercial because that wasn't scheduled already. I find this laughable. They weren't trying to change the subject at all. These were already planned for the NBA Finals. That's where they played first. Like, this is just blatant. You could call it clickbait, I guess. 233,000 views, though. I guess it worked. Then we have another piece, PC Games N. Cyberpunk 2077. Where did all the punk go? It's got all the gears, but no idea. We're basing this on what we've seen so far. That's interesting. But the piece says, now I understand CDPR has spent a lot of money on this game and was never going to promote it with a ramshackle roadside stall. Cyberpunk 2077 daubed in sloppy black spray, paint the E and N swung backwards in rebellious illiteracy, but the more previews and gameplay videos I see, the less it feels like anything Cyberpunk. Well, it is Mike Pondsmith's version of Cyberpunk. Recently, this sense has peaked. It's moved from, that doesn't seem very punk, to this is literally the opposite of Cyberpunk. If you're talking about merchandise deals and such, I suppose, but this is still a company trying to make money from a game. And even so, this is just marketing. This isn't the actual experience. This is why I find articles like this very, very premature. And again, they're basing their piece on marketing, which marketing's job is to try to get as many people interested as possible. Sure, I think there should be a distinction made that this isn't Grand Theft Auto in the future, but I definitely feel like from all the interviews and everything that I've gone through, there is many layers to this, and it's very, very different. It's very narrative focused. But anyway, another quote from this article. CDPR has burned any anti-consumerist bridges by selling expensive jackets, caps, and headphones, as well as getting several streamers to promote its wares. It would be naive to think that the studio won't want to see a return on its enormous investment, of course, but any notion of anti-corporatism crashed out the window when the game's official Twitter became best made. I just don't understand this. They're a company, they're still trying to make money. They can still have a lot to say. This is just an example of the dumb outrage that surrounds this game right now. And it seems like any of these highly anticipated titles, you just see it happen often. Now here's another one, coming from Kotaku this time, bringing a katana to a gunfight. And with this article specifically, it just shows a clear misunderstanding of the cyberpunk genre and just not realizing that this is fictional. And it's also based on Mike Pondsmith's vision of the dark future. But here, we're gonna go just read these few lines. A recent trailer for Cyberpunk 2077 was upsetting to a lot of people of color in my gaming circles. Most notably, my Asian diaspora friends were abuzz by the blatant Orientalism in a segment about an in-game gang called the Tiger Claws. The trailer's first shot of the Tiger Claws was drenched in red, a color I associate most closely with the Chinese visual culture. The promo image for the gang began with an English logo that was partially composed of suspect katakana letters and basically written a chopsticks font that is heavily associated with Western caricatures of Chinese people. This is just, it's fascinating the reaches that these people make. And I just want to point one thing out, CD Projekt Red did not come up with any of this. The Tiger Claws gang specifically is based on Mike Pondsmith. This is actually coming from the Night City sourcebook. I believe this was released in 1991. Tiger Claws, a combat gang in the Japan community in the residential zone below Japantown. The gang also occasionally protects the Japanese community at large. It is rumored that they are financially backed by Arasaka. The Tigers use enhanced reflexes and martial arts as their weapons. That's the in-lore. That is what the Tiger Claws are in Cyberpunk 2020. Now here in 2077, it doesn't seem like they're drastically different. But let's get back to this piece. It continues, it says, although the music in the background reminded me of Chinese operatic ballads with its distinct vibrato, none of my Chinese or Japanese friends could confirm the origin of the music because the music is been completely originally made by CD Projekt Red. This was already announced. They said that this was all original. They were trying to make music for the future. They were trying to figure out what music would be like in 2077. Like, this is just easy research that you could do, Kotaku. Anyway, this article continues. It says, it was ethnically ambiguous, and I didn't understand why a lovely ballad was played over a video about a murderous gang. I spotted a bonsai tree, and one of the characters was wielding a katana. The cultural markers were all over the place. Turns out the gang is Japanese. Sure, confusion happens, but the mix-up becomes a problem when video games can present clear differences between Anglo culture versus French culture, and then we have Asian characters who are mishmash of Chinese and Japanese. Now, I don't understand any of the points. This is all coming off as an extreme reach. Like, there is different Asian cultures present in the game. We have corporations like Kang Tao, which is a rising Chinese corporation in the Cyberpunk 2077 universe. And then we obviously have Arasaka, a superpower pretty much in the dark future, and they are Japanese, and that culture has translated heavily into Night City because they pretty much own the city for the most part. But again, this piece lacks research, so none of this is at all cited. But here is coming from the Cyberpunk 2077 World Book. This was released just months ago. Here's an overview of the Tiger Claws gang. One of the largest Night City criminal groups, the Tiger Claws are a ruthless territorial gang from Japantown who use methods similar to those of Asian organized crime syndicates like the Triads and Yakuza. That's who they are based on. That's the stereotype. And the Cyberpunk 2077 universe, the Cyberpunk universe, has lots of stereotypes. Even in Cyberpunk 2020, this is something that would have outraged many if they were included in the game, but the Sacred Blades gang. They are a combat gang based on American Indian culture. I can just imagine the outrage that would have emerged if that was translated into this game, but it wasn't. And then there is, of course, other quote-unquote stereotypes present in 2077, like the Valentinos, a mostly Latin gang, and the Sixth Street, which is an America militia-like gang composed of veterans. But anyway, let's finish up the rest of this piece and what it says. This is part of a larger video game history of Western designers not being able to differentiate between different Asian cultures, yet choosing to exotify them for a non-Asian audience. I have no idea how the Tiger Claws were winning all those turf wars if they kept bringing swords to a gunfight. Well, enhanced reflexes and having martial arts as a background is probably why. Yet they are the one gang in that Cyberpunk trailer that is swinging swords. The Asian character who wields a sword is a mainstay in Western video games. And then here in quotes it says, I am so tired of these design choices. I'm tired of the video game industry not doing further research and understanding the material that they're giving commentary on, and also rushing to judgments. But those are just some of the hit pieces that have come CDPR's way, but the big one that everybody is talking about is none of that. It's actually in regards to crunch, and this is just going to take a lot longer to break down, but I will start off by saying, again, this is just all being blown out of proportions, with all the facts just not being on the table for everyone to know, so I want to point them out for you, and hopefully you have a better understanding of the situation. And I believe it was another YouTuber, Hoaglaw, he's a lawyer, does a lot of video game analysis. He pointed out that a lot of people tend to make these situations out to be that they're black and white, when in reality this is a very gray situation, a very gray area, and I believe that is the best way to put it. So anyway, why all the outrage has emerged is coming from this article coming from Jason Schreier of Bloomberg. He wrote, Cyberpunk 2077 publisher orders 6-day weeks ahead of launch. And the piece contains the following. It says, Polish video game developer CDPR told employees on Monday that 6-day work weeks will be mandatory leading up to the November release of the highly anticipated Cyberpunk 2077, reneging on an earlier promise to not force overtime on the project. But an account from a CDPR employee recently, as well as an employee to staff earlier this week, indicated the company has not lived up to its word. The employee, who asked not to be named discussing private info, said some staff had already been putting in nights and weekends for more than a year. In the email, CDPR studio head Adam Badowski wrote that he was optimistic about the state of Cyberpunk 2077. Now, though, he wrote, it was time to fix the game's many lingering bugs and glitches. Starting today, the entire development studio is in overdrive. Your typical amount of work in one day of the weekend is what they're going to be needed now. I take it upon myself to receive the full backlash for this decision. I know this is in direct opposition to what we've said about crunch. It's also in direct opposition to what I personally grew to believe a while back, that crunch should never be the answer, but we've extended all of the possible means of navigating the situation. So, before we touch more on this Bloomberg story, let's go through the development timeline and what CDPR has said previously about crunch. In 2017, in October of 2017, CDPR put out a statement about company morale at the time, and they pretty much took a very hard stance. They said this approach to making games is not for everyone. And I put up my own video on the situation, statements coming from 43 developers, former and current, in which it was mixed. Some developers felt like they knew what they were getting into when they signed up for working at CD Projekt Red, while others just didn't like how things were, so they decided to go to another company to work. The point is that it's very split. Some developers feel like working all these extra hours is fine, others obviously do not, because they're reaching out to people like Jason Schreier to talk about stuff like this. But that was what was said in 2017 by CDPR's heads. Now we move to May of 2019, when CD Projekt Red reached out to Jason Schreier of Kotaku, and they made a very different stance on the development of Cyberpunk 2077, in which they pledged to be more humane to its workers. And this is what was said at the time. We're known, let me be humble for a moment here, we are known for treating gamers with respect. That was said by Marcin Nowinski, the company's co-founder, in an interview with Kotaku. This is what we've been working hard towards, and I actually would like for us to also be known for treating developers with respect. And Jason Schreier notes, one of the ways the company plans to do that, Nowinski said, is through a non-obligatory crunch policy. That isn't brand new, but that the Warsaw-based CDPR plans to push harder for. He wants to make it clear to Cyberpunk 2077 devs that even though the studio asked them to work on nights and weekends, it's not mandatory. When probed, Nowinski wouldn't promise to limit crunch to certain periods or offer specific numbers, other than to say that he hoped to make this public statement and it would help CDPR employees feel more comfortable telling their managers when they don't want to put in extra hours. I think this is the commitment we're ready to make today, and we'll be listening to people, he said. We definitely open a lot of lines of dialogue here, and we'd like to start with that. Now moving further down into this piece, Nowinski and the studio head at CDPR, Adam Badowski, would be asked by Jason Schreier if they planned for overtime into their schedules for games like Cyberpunk 2077, and they responded by saying, we're trying not to plan it, Nowinski responded with. However, sometimes it results in that, yes, so we need additional time. Internal planning in games is really hard. Like, one big thing I don't think anybody could have anticipated is a global pandemic on the scale of what we've seen here in the year 2020. But finally, the last part of this piece that I will mention, when pressed, the one specific promise that they would make was that Cyberpunk 2077's final hours will be less crunchy than the last games. I think we can promise that it'll be better than The Witcher's finishing period, and so far it seems like it has. But just a month later, June of 2019, E3, CDPR's boss, Marcin Nowinski, again made a huge promise that there would be no crunch at all for Cyberpunk 2077's developers, and this is the promise that everybody's saying that CDPR reneged on. And these are the specific quotes. Jason said, if I'm a designer at CDPR and I say, you know what, I have kids, I have a family, I'm going to work from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day and that's it, even until the very end, am I going to be okay with that? Nowinski said, yes. Jason, no matter what? Nowinski, yes. Jason, so you can commit to that? Owinski, we've committed to that already. Jason, that's good to hear because oftentimes it feels like there's these social pressures and subtle pressures. And Owinski added, we can never be 200% sure that there won't be some pressure, but it's actually our management's work to make sure people are okay with that. And I think I'd like people to tell other people within the company that that's okay, because that's when we are successful introducing it, but it's so far so good. And that was the promise that he made, and it has not aged well because of the world situation and the need to get the game through these final stages now. A reminder, this mandatory crunch is reportedly just an extra day a week for 6 weeks, but the timeline is not quite over yet. Moving to January of 2020, we finally got an indication just months later after E3 2019 that what Marcin Owinski said, he probably shouldn't have said because it just wasn't true. And I say that because Adam Kaczynski, the company's CEO, answered a question in which somebody asked, is the development team required to put in crunch hours? And Kaczynski responded saying, to some degree, yes, to be honest. Kaczynski went on to say that we try to limit crunch as much as possible, but it is the final stage. We try to be reasonable in this regard, but yes, unfortunately. And see, I have a sneaking suspicion that what Marcin Owinski told Jason Schreier at E3 2019, I just have to wonder if he was supposed to say that or not. And remember, a month prior to that interview, he had told alongside Adam Badowski something that was, well, it was pretty much said again here in 2020 at the beginning of the year by Adam Kaczynski, and I believe that was their initial stance, that in the final stages there may need to be some extra hours added. And that seems to still be their stance, but when talking labor like we are right now, it is important to understand the laws, and the fact that Poland is different, with better worker protections, which I think people need to know about. This is coming from, I believe, a Polish government website, and it outlines the labor laws in Poland. Working hours cannot exceed 8 hours in any 24 or an average of 40 hours in an average 5-day working week, and a reference period applied by the employer of not more than 4 months. Now, overtime. This is the key thing. This is where crunch is at. This is a big problem in the video game industry, the tech industry, and it's just a problem overall with workers, every industry, if we're being honest. Overtime in Poland cannot exceed 150 hours in any one calendar year for each worker, but unless a collective bargaining agreement, the employer's work regulations, or the employment contract provide otherwise. And again, we don't know the contracts at CDPR, so we have no idea of knowing if this is different. Weekly working hours plus overtime cannot exceed an average of 48 hours in the referenced period applied by the employer. And then some added details about employees that do work overtime, what they're entitled to is 100% of pay for working nights, Sundays, and bank holidays. They'll get 50% of their pay for working overtime on any other day than those mentioned above, 100% of their salary for every overtime hour worked above the average weekly norm in the reference period unless the norm was exceeded as a result of overtime, for which the employee is entitled to receive the supplements mentioned again in the points above. And then lastly, rights to undisturbed rest. All employees are entitled to at least 11 hours undisturbed rest in every 24 and at least 35 rest hours each week. That is supposedly the Polish labor laws, which do sound pretty different than what we have here in the United States. It sounds a lot better there, and I definitely feel that needs to be pointed out when you're making comparisons to other companies in this AAA games industry, in which, well, they don't operate in a country like Poland. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm an expert on Polish labor laws, because I'm not. There's obviously lots of intricacies, it's a lot more complicated than what's written right here, but what is clear, I find it very hard to believe that CDPR is having employees work 100-hour work weeks, and based on their statements the last year or two, it definitely is clear that they're making efforts to change for the better. This year has been rough from a financial standpoint, and also trying to get this game out the door this November. Now, I obviously stated my disappointment on Twitter, and I am disappointed that this is happening, but I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to realize that this is being blown out of proportion. CDPR for the last 2 years has made great efforts to improve, but this year has thrown a giant curveball at things, and they have to get this game out the door, and 6 weeks of hard work is going to pay off. I mean, this is actually pointed out by Colin Moriarty on Twitter, but CDPR is forecasting to net $500 million in profits for its fiscal year. It gives 10% of profits to its employees as bonuses. They employ roughly 1,000 people. In that situation, the average bonus is $50,000 a person. Median per capita income in Poland is $5,000 a year, which that is very big money, and you don't see this from a lot of the video game industry. You also don't see a lot of companies even paying for overtime. Now, following this Bloomberg piece being published by Jason Schreier, we got another response coming from Adam Badowski on Twitter, and he wrote the following. These last 6 weeks are our final sprint on a project we've all spent much of our lives on, something we care for deeply. The majority of the team understands that push, especially in light of the fact that we've just sent the game to certification, and every day brings us visibly closer to shipping a game we want to be proud of. And if you have not heard, Cyberpunk 2077, as of now, has gone gold. A huge achievement. Congratulations to all the developers. But this statement does continue, and it points out, this is one of the hardest decisions that Adam has had to make, but everyone is well compensated for every extra hour they put in, and like in recent years, 10% of the annual profit our company generates in 2020 will be split directly among the team, and those were the numbers I just brought up before with Colin Moriarty pointing out that, yeah, a lot of these employers are going to get some big money. Now, as I wrap up my thoughts on this subject, what I will say is that this is a problem all over the world, all facets of work, people overworking, being forced to overwork. But the thing is with Cyberpunk 2077, from what I've seen, it seems like a lot of developers are just disappointed by the outrage. People saying they're now going to boycott the game. You're actually doing the complete opposite. You're actually hurting maybe the developers' pay, this hard work that they have all put in. And when you actually complain about Cyberpunk 2077, you're going to be complaining about this entire gaming industry, because Naughty Dog's The Last of Us Part 2, lots of crunch. Red Dead Redemption 2, crunch. God of War, it's every single game that you can think of has had crunch. This is a problem industry-wide, and there is no clear solution. But overall, I am in agreement that things have to improve, especially because it's alarming with the burnout rate that is hitting this video game industry. All of those talented developers are leaving this industry behind because it's too much, and many of them just believe it's not worth it anymore. But at least with CDPR, this is a company being proactive. I have to believe things would have been different had there not been a pandemic. As one CDPR dev wrote recently on crunch in the games industry, it is my experience that game devs have relative solidarity in this respect from top to bottom, regardless of position. I must disappoint you. Game dev managers are not the proverbial capitalist exploiters who count money while smoking a cigar and look at the fragile developers from time to time. As I said before, these situations are complicated, case by case, very gray. CDPR is at the very least being open about this, and I believe will continue to improve and learn, unlike other companies that won't even acknowledge their mistakes. Getting into our last few topics, we now move to Epic Games, who's been taking some pretty big L's the last few weeks. Of course, as you all know, they are currently in court battling with Apple over the store policies, and things are not going their way as of late at the very least. Recently, a judge says Epic was not honest when it bypassed Apple's payment system in Fortnite, and that's not really shocking news. That's going to be a lengthy court battle, but something to keep your eyes on is the United States government investigating Epic. The Department of the Treasury is reportedly looking into the American companies behind Fortnite and League of Legends over their ties to Chinese tech titan Tencent. This is a report coming from, I believe it is Business Insider. The same government body that investigated TikTok and WeChat is now looking into Epic Games and Riot Games, and this has been a big thing with the Trump administration going after a lot of the tech industry, companies that have attachments to China. And this is, according to a new Bloomberg report, both companies received letters from the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. The report states regarding how they handle security for American user data, the report says. And the interesting thing with Epic Games, they've came under scrutiny for this exact issue. I believe it was last year, in which a lot of people were looking into the Epic Games store. They found some really sketchy things with the software, and that ended up being mostly debunked, but there's still been a lot of concerns over Tencent's involvement with Epic Games. But getting back into this report, it notes that the issue appears to be the two companies, Riot Games and Epic's, relationship with Chinese conglomerate Tencent. Tencent owns a 40% stake in Epic Games based in Cary, North Carolina, and wholly owns Riot Games based in LA, California. Epic is most well known for Fortnite, but also known for Rocket League. Riot is most well known for League of Legends, and more recently Valorant. Both companies operate games with hundreds of millions of players. Tencent itself is far from a bit player in the world of gaming. It's quietly the biggest game company in the world. Facts right there. Aside from its significant stake in Epic and outright ownership of Riot Games, Tencent has investments in Supercell, Ubisoft, Activision, and other notable game publishers. This has been a topic of discussion for a long time. There's been many concerns raised over Tencent's influence in the gaming industry, and it now looks like the Trump administration is beginning at the very least to take a look, and this is well, it's no matter what, not great news for Epic Games, who's been, like I said before earlier, taking some big L's here in 2020. But now we move on to the next topic, and this actually involves another company which has a slight involvement with Tencent, and that is Blizzard. And it's because former Blizzard CEO Mike Morhaime announced his new game company. 2 years after stepping down as CEO of Blizzard, the game company he co-founded in 1991, Mike Morhaime is back with his next venture. It's called Dreamhaven, and it's a combination of a publisher and developer with a common goal to empower creators, help bring their ideas to life, and create original gaming experiences that foster meaningful connections between players. Dreamhaven also revealed its first two internal studios, Moonshot Games and Secret Door. Moonshot is headed by a trio of Blizzard veterans including former Hearthstone lead Jason Chase, StarCraft 2 director Dustin Browder, and Hearthstone creative director Ben Thompson. Though it's very early days, when we think about Moonshot, we imagine a studio that celebrates curiosity and courage, Chase said in a statement. We aspire to be bold in our approach, and we think about the best way to do that is to create a culture centered around trust. Secret Door, meanwhile, is similarly led by a team of former Blizzard developers including Chris Sagety, executive producer on Hearthstone, Alan Dabiri, technical director on Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2, and Eric Dodds, designer on World of Warcraft and StarCraft. Morhaime stepped down as CEO of Blizzard in 2018, though he stayed on in a consultancy role until last year. In an interview with the Washington Post, he said that one of his goals of his new company was to build an environment focused on creators, something that was likely a challenge under Activision, which became Blizzard's parent company in 2008. And I have to believe that Mike Morhaime has lots of regrets with the deal that he made about a decade ago. But now here in present day, it's very encouraging with all the talent that they have with this new gaming company. And as I said earlier this year, when the whole Warcraft Reforged disaster blew up, I made a point that Blizzard, the current Blizzard, is dead, just like the current BioWare is not the same BioWare that delivered amazing games like Mass Effect 1 and Mass Effect 2, Dragon Age Origins, and with Blizzard, they're just not the same. And that's because of all the talent are no longer here, and that's because of Activision. They have taken over, their influence has ruined what Blizzard once was. It's going to be interesting to see what Dreamhaven turns into. Lots of talent, and I really am encouraged by the fact that they're independent. They don't have this giant company over them anymore, and this is a chance to start over. Lots of Blizzard veterans are leading this, which is quite telling. Modern day shell of itself Blizzard keeps enjoying controversy, with employees a few months ago revealing how they were being paid extremely low salaries compared to competition. Just the other day, Activision shut down yet another office, firing more workers. That is Activision. That is who they are, record profits and still constantly showing workers the door. For many, it seemed Morhaime was the heart and soul of Blizzard, and I have to wonder how many devs will abandon ship and join his new venture in the coming weeks and months. But we proceed forward now to the final topic of the day, and that is Spider-Man Remastered coming for the PlayStation 5. There's already been some controversy over some of the details with it. It almost sounds as bad as Control with how 505 Games was handling that. It's been very complicated with how this remaster works, but the current outrage is not in regards to that, but it's actually the decision to change Peter Parker's face. And this is something that I've been vocal about on Twitter in recent days. It just doesn't look right. But here's the details coming from Polygon. According to a new post on Sony's blog, Peter Parker's facial model has been changed in the remastered version of the game from John Bubniak's face to Ben Jordan's. The blog post explains that in order to bring out the best possible visuals for the remastered version of the game, the development team needed a better match for the facial capture done by Yuri Lowenthal. Possibly by coincidence, this new Peter Parker also happens to look a bit more like MCU's Peter, Tom Holland, than the previous actor did. Yes, it looks like a discount, deepfake Tom Holland. And if you look at the comparisons, some of the videos that have been shown comparing the scenes of this remastered scene, it just doesn't look right. It looks off, like the new facial animations for Peter Parker. It just doesn't look as crisp, you know? It just... they de-aged him. That's my biggest issue with this. The older Peter Parker looked like he was older than Miles Morales. This one looks like he just lost about 5 to 10 years. And yes, the conspiracies over Marvel trying to make everything look like the MCU, this has been triggering a lot of people. But we did get an update from Insomniac at the time. The creative director, Brian Inahar, he tweeted a statement about the recasting choice. He said, "The news about the new Peter Parker face model has surprised some of you, and we at Insomniac totally understand understand your reaction. Heck, it even took me a while to get used to Peter's new look. But as we discussed the franchise's future and moving to the PS5, it quickly became apparent that delivering even more believable looking characters made finding a better facial match for actor Yuri Lowenthal, who we all love as Peter, a necessity. And then the statement continues saying how much they care about this character and they hope that people can put their trust in them. But I will say I'm not necessarily buying the reason given. It just doesn't really make a lot of sense. I don't think you've really seen this ever happen. It's just such a strange decision because the Peter Parker in the PlayStation 4 version, I think everybody liked him. Now, the reactions to this announcement and the footage has been mostly negative. If you actually go to the official PlayStation channel right now, the video's unlisted, but it has over 9,000 dislikes with only 4,000 likes, and the comment section is pretty much just roasting this version. Look how they massacred my boy, rest in peace PS4 Peter Parker, what have you done to my boy, and these comments go on and on. But the trailer with the most views right now is on GameSpot. They have 600,000 views and 17,000 dislikes. It's just a majority of people not liking the decision. Peter's face looks like the mixture of Tom Holland and Shawn Mendes, and yeah, just a very weird decision. I personally believe the reason why they did this, there has to be a contract dispute or something going on behind the scenes. I know there's all kinds of theories out there, some with Marvel's Avengers even being involved, but either way, just a strange decision that I personally feel like they should have just left the face how it was, but that's just me. Anyway, to wrap up this video, I again want to give a huge shout out to today's sponsor, and that is Displate. Love the prints, well manufactured, and I highly recommend that you check the link down in the description and go check out some of these prints and get one for yourself. But also let me know your thoughts on everything that we did discuss today down in the comment section below. But thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video or if you found any informative value, and make sure to follow my other social media accounts for updates on new videos. Links are always down in the description below. I'm most active on Twitter, giving opinions on news that I do not always get in the video form, so do make sure to follow me over there. Also check out my Discord for all sorts of discussion on games. And again, thank you for joining. Consider subscribing for more videos like this. I'll see you later.